Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews Saturday Conversation Show, a weekly interview series where I talk to entertainment media personalities, content creators, and filmmakers about their work and love of movies. Today's guest is Enzo Tedeschi, an award-winning Australian director, writer, and producer whose work includes The Tunnel, Event Zero, and the Dead House Dark series. Enzo is also a founder of Dead House Films and the streaming platform Dead House TV. And I really recommend people check out Enzo's website. That is enzotedeschi.com.au to check out all news, all of his links. Also go to deadhouse.tv to check out a lot of his work in regards to movies he's directed, produced, shorts. And so you're such a prolific guy, man. It's really cool that you got this deadhouse.tv because I know when The Tunnel came out so many years ago, the big thing about that movie coming out is like the movie was free for people to watch. And deadhouse.tv, you got so much content there that's practically free for people to watch as well. And I think it's a real kind of cool kind of streaming thing. How long have you had that up there now for?
That's been a few years now. I think the part of the point of the website was not just to be able to showcase my stuff, but also there's a lot of like I tend to work with a lot of emerging filmmakers and directors or producers that are doing really great work and sort of struggling to get it sort of seen and out there. So it just felt like a way that we could bring some like-minded people and content together for people to just discover stuff that literally, unless you're trawling Vimeo or attending film festivals, it's probably because a lot of it's short content. You're probably never going to see it.
Mm. Shorts are so vital as well. If I had a dollar for every time I spoke to an independent indie filmmaker, especially in horror movies, and they
Yeah,
started with a short, and their
yeah.
short floundered, turned into a feature or turned into kind of like a showcase to get a feature, I'll be a millionaire. Honestly, it's just such a vital part of the filmmaking process, I think.
100%. Yeah, completely agree. Completely agree.
So I wanted to go way back here in the time machine and talk about Enzo as a young boy. I was reading an interview that you did that when you were 8 years old, your father was a projectionist and he had a 16 millimeter print of Alien,
Mhm.
and you watched Alien with him at that young age, and that was like the moment. Damascus, Saul walking in Damascus kind of moment kind of thing. Like this is like,
Yeah.
wow, like this is what I'm gonna do. And clearly here we are, so how many years later, and you're doing like making movies, especially genre film. What do you remember about that time watching Alien with your father, that first time? Because it would have been a memory to cherish for sure.
Well, it's interesting because I think I think why it affected me so much is because he didn't watch it with me, right? He put me in a
Right.
dark room, turned it on, and then left. I'm like, oh, okay. Seriously, the first time I sat down to try and watch it, I think because I was so young, I just didn't know what to expect. Like, it wasn't a time where, you could jump on to YouTube and watch a trailer or whatever. Like, I just saw this really cool poster and I knew I liked science fiction. And so I just kind of went, I want to see this movie. And he's like, yeah, okay, no worries, put it on. And so I barely made it through the opening sequence on first watch, man. Like,
Mm,
I didn't even get, that whole sequence of all the tunnels and the spaceship, and it's all empty just before things start to wake up. And
yeah.
it's like already between the music and the whatever, it did not, it really affected me. And I think obviously went back and finished the film eventually and really enjoyed everything that about that film. To this day, still one of my favorite films. But I think one of the reasons it affected me so one of the reasons that I cited as a big influence and whatever is it did have that profound effect where I was just kind of like, up until then, films were just fun. There were things I would just, well, I was just a kid, right? You just watch things because like, haha, yeah, fun, light, fluffy, whatever. I think it was the first time I watched something that really affected me in a way that was unexpected. And I was like, oh,
Mm,
that can do that. That's interesting. And then I think the turning point for me much later when I actually realized that it's probably what I wanted to do was then watching Goodfellas for the first time. And I was like,
mm,
I think it was the first time that I clicked that there was somebody actually driving, like there was a hand at work, not in a bad way, because obviously if you start to feel directors imposing themselves on the work, it kind of tends to break it. But I think I don't know, obviously me with my Italian background, there was so much that I was recognizing just culturally, on top of it being a really great gangster film, and then just realized the style of it was something that somebody had to come up with, that somebody was pushing and directing very, very, very consciously. And I think that was it for me. Like putting those things together, suddenly I was like, I think this is what I need to do.
There's an interesting thing happening in my household right now. I got my oldest son is 11, turning 12, and I watch movies with him all the time and such. It's just part of my, I take him to the films whenever I can.
Yeah.
Lately, though, he's foraying into filmmaking. I have an older digital camera that I had. Well, I haven't been using it, and he's fallen in love with the Godzilla films, like the Japanese Godzilla ones.
Cool.
He just loves them. He's watched pretty much all of them now, and he's making his own Godzilla films now. He's up in his room. He's got his thing, and now my younger son, Gabriel. He's taking the camera. He's making in these Sonic toys. He's making these films as well. I'm editing it for him. We're putting music and soundtracks to it.
Awesome.
And it's made me think, in regards to you, do you remember the first time you started foraying, like even before, it was like a professional thing, but just creating and trying to make your own films? Did you like to grab your action figures or anything and make figures? Did you draw? Did you make anything like? Do you remember?
Yeah, little of all of the above. Actually, it's a really good question. No one's ever asked me that one before. I think because my father, as well as doing the projectionist thing, was a photographer and a bit of a like probably more of a videographer, I would say, rather than filmmaker. In terms of someone who made movies, he did a lot of a lot of client work and stuff like that. So I kind of had it around me my whole life. So I've always been surrounded by the gear, the cameras, the post equipment, the film reels, it was just always around. So I was always playing with stuff and just noodling with stuff. So I think that's why it's kind of, it feels like it's, in that way, it's kind of in my blood. Like I've never known a time where I was meaningfully introduced to that stuff in a way that blew my mind. It was just part of everyday life as long as I can remember. But I did used to have like, my little Star Wars figures or my He-Man figures. And at the time, because it was probably before when I was really young, probably before video cameras were really quite sort of accessible. And even if we did have one that I could use, I don't think my dad would have been letting me play around with an expensive video camera at age 8. Yeah. But what he did let me do was, because he had a whole bunch of photographic cameras as well, he would, it's a lot easier to load up a roll of film. And so I'd take my camera and go and like pose these figurines and try to take photos like they were, in mid-battle or whatever, and try and lie them down on a surface that looked like the background was a wall, so I could have them like jumping and stuff, and I didn't have to like suspend them. I could just like pose them and it looked like they were leaping through the air and all of that sort of stuff. So I can't really point a finger to the first time, but I think that it's just the storytelling aspect of it, the escapism, all of that sort of stuff. I think has just always been, well, it's never been far from my brain, really.
So we're going to fast forward a bit now. I just want to talk about the tunnel, because the tunnel is really kind of the film that really kind of put you on the map in a lot of ways. 13 years ago, I think it was now, that the tunnel came out. It was 2011, right?
Yep.
Now, I remember when that movie came out, because the era of that time, we were far away from Blair Witch, but Paranormal Activity had come out not that long before that, and that kind of reset kind of like the whole thing about how you could make an efficient horror movie, do it with a low budget, with this, the mockumentary thing wasn't new, but it was like revitalized through these movies, right?
Yep.
But when you decided to go through, make the tunnel, with your background, you're talking about films like Alien and Goodfellas, and I know you like Jaws and all these other films as well. These are kind of classic, traditional made films. The found footage thing, though, was that a style at the time that you really appreciated or liked, or was it more of a kind of like an efficiency thing where you knew you could make a film for a lower budget and make it effective because there's a filmmaking style now that shows that it can be done? So I was just really curious about the creation of the style of the film.
Yeah, look, great question. And the answer is probably a little bit of all of those things, right? So when my producing partner and writing partner on that film, Julian Harvey, we decided we were going to make a film. Suddenly it's it's the same classic problem that everybody faces, which is, all right, now how? how do we
Yeah,
how do
sure.
we how do we do this? How do we pull it together and make something that's good but doesn't feel like we've fallen short of the mark that we're trying to hit? So if you don't have any money and you've got a limited amount of resources and gear, trying to go out and make Jaws with a couple of PD 150s and a Mac in your bedroom is probably a little ambitious. So we just sort of flipped that on its head and went, all right, let's not go, here's our magnum opus movie that we need to make and then work out how to make it. Let's start from the other end and go, what do we have? What can we do? What are we good at that we know isn't going to cost us a lot of money or any money because we already have it. So, Julian was working as doing a lot of work filming for TV, like observational doco TV and stuff. So he had that sort of documentary filming background. We were both editors, so we knew at the very least we could get some decent pictures into a camera and get the post-production through without too many dramas. But the found footage thing and the horror thing, when you start looking at it from a commercial perspective, horror in and of itself, it can work without needing sort of big names and big stars. If the concept is strong enough, it tends to transcend. That's a big bonus. The found footage thing was kind of a natural progression of that. Because it's interesting because the tunnel, for as much as people call it a found footage film, it's actually kind of a documentary. Like it's a fake documentary. So I think that plays even more strongly into the fact, like I was editing a lot of factual and doco stuff at the time, and as was Jules, and he was shooting a lot of it. And so suddenly we're like, well, we just need to go and shoot a pretend version of the stuff we're making every day for other people, and just wrap that around in a story that was effective. So it kind of just came out of, what are our limitations and how do we turn those into assets? Didn't hurt that, didn't hurt that Blair Witch Project was one of my favorite films at the time. And so we just kind of, and as you pointed out, Paranormal, the timing was right. It was like, well, there's no reason we can't make something that hits that level of quality. And we were just trying to put ourselves on the map. So we just kind of like, let's just go and make the best version of that we possibly can.
The thing I really appreciate about your work in your career is that you had to be inventive in a lot of ways. There's an ingenuity towards it. You have to think outside of the box to get things done. When Tunnel came out, I don't know where we were in a kind of like the crowdfunding kind of space. I know now these days is a very popular mechanism for people to use for funding and such. But back then, I don't remember exactly online wise where we were with social media and all that other stuff. What was crowdfunding back then? Can you give us a refresher about what was it back then? Was it something that people were dubious of? Was it something that was really new on the scene? I'm just really curious about
Super
that.
new, super new. So Kickstarter was just a thing, had just started being a thing. I think Indiegogo was already around, but it was very early days of Kickstarter, as evidenced by the fact that we ended up being Australia's first crowdfunded feature. Like we were the first movie. When we started putting together this notion of crowdfunding the film, I think the most expensive or most ambitious thing that we had seen go through on Kickstarter was somebody had raised like, I don't know, 30 or 40 grand to like build a RoboCop statue in Detroit. Like it was that sort of stuff. It wasn't necessarily being used for film. There was a project called Pioneer One, which was a sci-fi series that was being released on BitTorrent at the time, and that was being crowdfunding. Every episode was being crowdfunded as they went. So it wasn't without precedent. And that was one of the things that we pointed to, because we're like, well, they're crowdfunding it, and then they're using the money to make the thing, and then they've got the instant audience from the crowdfunding, so they know it's going to find somebody, but then they run another campaign which just grows it. And it was just this feedback loop that was working really well for them. And so that was kind of part of where the thinking came from. But yeah, no, it was very early days for crowdfunding, I think. And on top of that, we didn't use any of the established platforms to do it. So because we came up with this crazy idea of trying to, sell a frame, pre-sell frames, we kind of built our own version of that as well. So it was even even weirder by another degree of magnitude when we were pitching it to people.
Please support Matt's movie reviews on Patreon. Get access to exclusive content, request movie reviews and top 10 lists, and help support my work. Please click on the Patreon link in the description below. If the tunnel was being made today, if you were to make the tunnel today, when that movie came out, it was such a big thing because, number one, of the way that it was being made, and also you pretty much kind of gave the movie away for free, right? I mean, you pretty much had movies to watch it. Did it get a cinema release as well? Was it still available in cinemas for people to watch?
Yeah, we did a very limited theatrical here in Australia for about a month. Like we did weekly screenings for about a month or something. It wasn't crazy, but it was we did some theatrical, we did pay TV, we did DVD. And it was, in all the other bits and pieces like airlines. We had an iPad app at the time. We built our own custom app to release it that way as well. And that was all day and date. So the night we went in for the premiere at Popcorn Taxi was our premiere actually. So the night we went in for our premiere, by the time we had come out of that screening, the torrent had gone live. And the screening was happening at the same time as the pay TV screening was happening on Showtime. And so it was just kind of all just went day and date all out at the same time was kind of the strategy. Yeah.
To me, the biggest change from back then in 2011 to now is the advent of TV streaming and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Especially the quality of TV just went way up over that time. I think to the point where, in my opinion, like what TV represents now in a lot of ways is what the character-driven movies of the 1970s were, right? Because it seems to me like like a lot of things character-driven has gone to streaming, and I think spectacular has gone cinema, which is to me kind of bullshit. I mean, you need a character-driven stuff on the screen as well, So, but if Tunnel was being made today, how would you envision it being done today in regards to how it will be exhibited? Would you imagine it will still be a movie, or could you see the tunnel today being a TV series, for example? Because to me, that's a type of movie that I still think can be expanded to a series. I think there's potential there for like different stories, different chapters, different things going on, especially in a documentary format, like the whole true crime thing on TV. I think you can make tunnel like a 6-8 series true crime horror documentary, fake documentary thing for sure. So do you think today it still be a movie format, or considering your forays into TV and streaming, it could be TV way?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and I've looked at pretty much all of them over the years as potentials, and so we'll see where that lands. We're just in renewed talks about potentially doing another film, like a sequel film at the moment, but the interesting thing that you leave out of that, which I think is very relevant for 2024 when we're having this conversation, is the online web series kind of avenue as well. So I guess it depends on whether you're talking, if we were doing it today, being who we were 13 years ago, which is a bunch of nobodies making our first film, might inform that decision a little bit. I think for me, on a personal level, on a creative level, I've just always been a fan of film. I just the format and you sit down, hour and a half, 2 hours, you get a self-contained story. It's got a beginning and a middle and an end. Maybe it keeps going into another film, but you get a satisfying conclusion. Like that. I enjoy that kind of storytelling. So I think my first instinct would be to try and deliver that. Just because it's where I tend to live, it's where I spend a lot of my time. The episodic thing is great because, as you point out, you get to do a lot more. You can explore a lot more ideas, go a lot deeper with certain things. But then there's this element of it's different if you make a movie that's successful and then you go, all right, let's continue the story, work out what a sequel might look like. I think that when you get into series territory, if you start running out of story or running out of what inspires or excites you as a storyteller, if you're the showrunner, I guess, then there's this commercial pressure to go, yeah, but it's working, man. We're not going to stop. So you have to keep going and keep padding, and sometimes that can dilute. Like some series can pull the trick off, right? You can get through an entire season, an entire series of Breaking Bad from beginning to end, and it's just phenomenal, right? From go to woe. Not all series can maintain that, and sometimes you get to the end of a show's run, and you're like, we just did not need the last two series. Last two seasons, you know what I mean? So I think there's a danger in padding out. But the third version of that is something like I don't know if you're familiar with. There's a YouTube series called Marble Hornets. I think that's what it's called, Marble Hornets. And it's basically a found footage, lost footage, found footage type show, but it's all on YouTube, and it's all just little chunks of story, and it's really quite effective. Like that would be another great way for a film or a story like The Tunnel, or a spin-off story like The Tunnel, to find a place in the world. So if what you're doing is trying to make a splash and trying to make an impact and get noticed as filmmakers, which is what we were doing, which is part of the reason why we gave it away for free, as well as doing all the other stuff, because we knew it would, A, get a huge audience that way, but B, get us noticed, for better or for worse. Doing something like that in the modern context would probably be something that could be really smart if you had the right approach to getting it out there and finding audience. Because at the end of the day, it's all about finding eyeballs, right? And you could do a film for streaming or a film for the cinema. It kind of doesn't matter so much anymore. It doesn't not matter, but it matters way less than it used to.
Very cool. Very cool. All right, I want to play a little game called Choose Between Two. So I'm going to give you two options.
Okay.
Tell me which one you're going to choose, and you're going to give me the reasons why. So I try to cater this as best I could to your tastes and what you like and such. So here we go. Okay,
this could be interesting.
First one. There's some hard ones, I think, but then again, I thought I'd throw out some curveballs to some people, and they just batter right out the
yeah, right. Okay.
So, all right, the first one: The Exorcist or The Shining?
Oh man, come on. I can't choose, man. I think if you ask me on any given day, it'll be a different answer. I love The Exorcist. It's one of my all-time favorite films, as is The Shining. Kubrick was an absolute master, but The Exorcist is just, there's something about that. I think I'm beginning to learn about myself. There's something about that religious horror that actually does something for me in a way that a lot of stuff, other stuff doesn't. So maybe today I'll have to go with The Exorcist. Tomorrow it'll probably be a different answer.
Next one, Ridley Scott or Steven Spielberg?
I think on balance, probably Steven Spielberg. I think because Ridley, for me, I have a rule with a bit of a mental rule for myself with directors, where there's like a 3-film pass, right? They knock it out of the park 3 times. I'm there for whatever they put on the screen. Ridley has got that, right? Like you probably don't even need to go past the 80s to be able to get 3 Ridley Scott films where you go, yeah, free pass, no worries. But I do find sometimes his films can be a bit hit or miss for me. Whereas I find while some Spielberg films are way better than others, I never have a bad time watching a Steven Spielberg film. Like it's beyond three film pass. It's like everything that guy ever does, I'm there for, and I've never come away going, oh, it wasn't, I enjoy everything he does. So I think that one's a little easier.
3-film pass, that's interesting. Okay. Okay, so this one is an interesting one because, opinions do vary on this one. Streaming or physical media?
Probably lean towards physical media. I do love a thing. I do love having a thing. I do love my wall of Blu-rays and discs and whatever in there. The convenience of streaming is really hard to go by, and it's great to be able to, I remember on multiple occasions, times on a Friday night where you go, I want to watch this movie, like back in the 90s, and you're just kind of like, all right, let's go down to the video store and rent it, and it's out. You're like, okay, let's go to the next video store and rent it. You like do the tour of all of the video rental places in your area, and it's like out everywhere, and it's just really frustrating. Whereas now, streaming alleviates a lot of that. You just kind of go, I feel like watching this. It's like between all of the streaming options, you could probably find 80 to 90% of what you could ever think of to want to watch. But there's also, you know, especially with you and I having the taste that we do, there's always some really obscure stuff that, you know, like Umbrella have just released that amazing new box set of Possession, and you know, it's an amazing film that for the longest time was almost impossible to find here in Australia. So you had to have your little physical copy if you wanted to actually watch a decent version of it. Otherwise, you know, the alternatives weren't great. So physical media, I think, is going to. I think it's already coming back around, and I think it's.
Oh yeah,
yeah. I think it's definitely on the long when you're playing the long game. Absolutely.
I think I personally believe that Blu-ray and DVD are going to go the way of vinyl. I think there's a good chance that, you know, some of that, and I think a big reason why is because while there is a lot of option comes with a lot of price. And so when you have like three or four streaming things, all of a sudden you're spending like $60 a month, right? You're just like, oh God, I don't know if I can, you know, keep up with those costs, especially these days. I'd rather, you know, have some like Blu-rays, and I still have all my Blu-rays and DVDs as well, you know. So, and you know, I'm the kind of nut that's got three different versions of The Exorcist, right, on Blu-ray. So
Yeah.
I go that way, you know.
Same. I think for me, my record is. I think other than the laser disc, I think I've owned every box set version available of The Godfather over the years.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
still have about four of them. I think some of them have gone, but everything from VHS to the new 4K. So it's you get obsessive sometimes.
Yeah, I have a bunch of them too because I used to work in retail. So when these DVDs box sets first came out, they're really cool, like the steel box sets and that stuff. I
Yeah,
got a few.
right.
I even got the one where it's like the cigar box. Have you ever got that one, the cigar box with the gun on top of it? And you open up
Nice.
and the DVD
Yeah,
in there.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Very nice.
Okay, next one. So you're watching a movie. It's like say a genre movie, horror. Practical effects or CGI? What would you rather see on the screen?
I think I think some of my fondest memories are of films that have a lot of practical effects, and if done well, they work really, really well. So I'd probably lean towards that. However, um, CGI is a complicated area at the moment because there's a lot of films right now, especially that you know market this whole no CGI, no CGI, no CGI, no CGI, and it's just not the case, right? So like, and I think that's an injustice to the amount of like, yeah, a perfect example, a recent example, and I was just watching a series on this recently from oh God, I can't remember the name of the YouTube channel. I'll have to
So the
work it out.
corridor crew.
They mention it, but the actual guy that they mention, he's got a four-part series. The videos are about 20
Right.
minutes each. And I think the series is called No CGI, is actually invisible CGI.
Okay. Okay.
You know, Top Gun Maverick. Oh, we did everything for real. We shot everything for real. It's like there's 2,400 VFX shots and about 400 VFX artists on that film. It's like,
Yeah.
I kind of get it, but also those people all did incredible work because we can't tell that a lot of those shots are not like, I think 50% of the jets in that film don't even exist. So, you know, yes, they shot a lot of stuff for real, but all of those shots are still CGI. So, you know, and I've always loved working with CGI for my projects. And a lot of the stuff that we've done has only ever been made possible because of clever visual effects. So, you know, I'd love to see the practical stuff, but the CGI is just it's just part of the the filmmaking toolkit these days. I don't think you can avoid it.
Yeah, definitely.
That was a very
Last
long-winded
one.
answer for what should have been a very short
No,
question.
no, long-winded's good. I love it. So last one. You're at the cinema. You're at the store. You're at the kiosk kind of thing. You
Yeah.
go for popcorn or candy. What's your go-to treat for watching movies?
If I have to choose one, it's absolutely popcorn, 100%. Like no trip to the cinema is the same without that smell of the buttered popcorn and that salty burn on your lips from having eaten too much. But I do find that there's a really good balance to be had if you find the right combination of salty and sweet. That's the magic.
The old Maltesers in the popcorn box kind of
Yeah,
thing,
Maltesers,
right?
maybe a frozen Coke or something, you know.
Mhm. I went to a premiere last night, which is going to go to my next question. I went to the Furiosa premiere last
Oh,
night,
nice. Yeah.
and
How was it? How was the film?
it's really good. I can't go too far into it
Of
because I signed it
course.
by, but I could say right now that if you liked Fury Road, the mythology and the world building is a way like it's expanded way more
Yeah, great.
in that film, and it's like big. It's a big when they call it a saga, it goes for like 2.5 hours as well. It's a long film,
Yeah.
but it's something else, and I think Hemsworth gives his best performance in it as well. I really
Yeah,
do.
well,
That
okay.
stuff. Yeah,
Yeah, cool.
but it's really good. And there's surprises in it as well. I don't want to give. I want to talk about it so much. We'll talk about it after. Yeah,
Yeah, no, no,
after
it's
the
fine.
film.
I shouldn't have asked. I know it's a bit cheeky of me.
But when I was at the premiere last night, they were giving away free drop tops, and I'm
Yeah,
trying my
right.
best not to eat that stuff, and so I had to turn down 3 rounds. Vanilla, caramel, boys are very much like, oh man, why? But I didn't need it. But still, choc tops, yeah, all that stuff. And there's cinema food, right? Popcorn, choc top. It's just your go-to. Yeah,
100%,
yeah.
yeah.
The Matt's Movie Reviews YouTube channel is brought to you by TeePublic. TeePublic is the world's largest marketplace for independent creators to sell their work on the highest quality merchandise. With over 1.2 million designs, TeePublic is sure to have something you'll love. Speaking of Mad Max and Furiosa, I was at like I said, the premiere last night. George Miller presents the film. He's talking about how 45 years ago Mad Max comes out, right? And it got me thinking, and I always had this thought, and I always talked about this all the time, how the Australian film industry, even though it doesn't award it, a lot of times it won't give monetary compensation to it, a lot of times it won't invest in it. It is built on the genre filmscape, the exploitation stuff, and even just like genre films in general, horror, action, all that kind of stuff, right? The stuff that gets a lot of the money and everything else is your marquee kind of like subject matter movies.
Hmm.
In your experience being in the industry, from when you started the tunnel and you had to crowdfund stuff yourself, for all the stuff you've done since then to now, has industry perception changed whatsoever in regards to the genre film space? Is now that hopefully over the decades there's more fresh blood in these bureaucratic positions, and maybe there's more support given to filmmakers in the horror action and film space, or is it still a thing where like you have done so many times before, like George Miller did 45 years ago, where you have to be really inventive and you have to think of ways to really try to get these movies made because we're not making the movie that about so and so important topic, blah blah blah. That's
Yeah,
in
yeah,
the
yeah.
tagline.
Look, I mean, it is a good question, and I don't think it's yours is an unfair assessment of the way things have been. Certainly, I think there's definitely been a cultural cringe through my career to the genre, especially with horror. Um, but I think there's a lot of reasons for that. You pointed to the films of the 70s and the 80s and that whole period because of the way that the sort of, I think a lot of it was down to the 10BA tax incentive and the way that was working. There was just a lot of films being made. And while we had some great stuff that knocked it out of the park and was quite successful, and we still, there are either cult classics or films like Mad Max that are, beyond cult status, I think, at this point. There was also a lot of crap being made. Like there's a lot of really bad movies being made because it was just a tax incentive. People were just looking for a tax break. They didn't care what came out the other end, right? So I think because there was probably just as many bad films as good films being made, if not more so, potentially, there's a bit of a cultural cringe towards that genre. It's kind of like we don't want to be known for this flood of that kind of bad filmmaking around the planet. So they worked out a way to sort of curb that. But I think even though that to some degree stopped and was lessened, there's still that cultural cringe stayed because a lot of the people, as you say, in the positions, the gatekeepers, shall we say, still remember that time. And so you say horror to people, and this is a problem I've had throughout my career. Like you say horror to people, it's a very, very broad definition, right? It's everything from Freddy and Jason to I don't know, Get Out or Midsummer, like, that's or The Shining even, which we talked about earlier. Like, there's a lot of different from the slasher to the really intelligent sort of thing, and I think you can make the topical genre film. Get Out's a perfect example, right? Those things are possible if you have people that are smart enough to see it and enable it rather than resist it. Now, I think, especially now, I think things are starting to change. The incredible worldwide success of a film like Talk to Me has turned a lot of eyeballs back down under to see what's coming out of Australia, I think. So it's a good time. It's better than it has been, but we it's just day by day, man. Always hustling to get the next thing up. It's always a hustle. Any film that gets made is a minor miracle, right? Let alone if it's actually successful at all. Let alone as successful as something like Talk to Me. So yeah, I think it's getting better, but it also goes in waves, right? So in 5 years' time, everybody will be sick of the glut of horror films that have come out of Australia, probably, and they'll be going, I don't know, let's go back and look at some drama or some comedy, which for the last couple of years seems like people have been less inclined to try and back the dramas in favor of the other stuff. So it's always changing. It's part of the challenge of the gig, I guess.
The thing I really like about what you've done lately as well, though, is that you're very transparent in a way that things are made, how to go about making things into, like, especially like emerging filmmakers. You have different courses, you have different videos, you've done all different things. And two things that always come across when I hear you talk about it, you said, number one, you need to have a temperament for this stuff. You can't, you're going to get frustrated, but you have to really go through those frustrations, because a lot of it is kind of like bureaucratic stuff, and you have to go through it and that. And another thing that I remember you said once is that the job is a lot of paperwork, right? You got to go, there's all that kind of stuff with it as well. Do you think a lot of that kind of stuff, the unglamorous side of the industry, emerging filmmakers just don't get yet, and it just takes experience? It takes, some, a couple, maybe a year or so of just going through, the foxhole of all the bureaucratic nonsense and everything else to really experience that, to really understand what it is to make a movie, especially independent film?
Sometimes, yeah. I think, I mean, like I said, I've worked with a lot of, first timers, and so first time feature filmmakers. So, we take them from a short and or from several shorts, and we take them into something bigger. The thing that inevitably I've seen it over and over again, and I recognize it because it was my journey too, right? It was my story as well. It's like you always hit a certain point, and I generally try and flag it with people before they get there and go, look, this is probably what's going to happen. And when you get to here, this is what's going to go down. And you shouldn't be surprised. Like, I remember the first time we looked at anything that had any proper, like, say, government funding that we had involved with any of our projects. And suddenly we're like, we've got all this money. We did this on, 10% of what we've got now. Imagine the things that we can do. But the reality is that 30% of that extra money goes right out the door on the things that you had before, and nothing's changed. It's just everything's much more expensive because you have to work at a certain level of compliance, right? So that's always a learning curve. But I think the reason I keep going back to these emerging filmmakers a lot of the time is that exactly what you're talking about, which is that exuberance and that enthusiasm to go. Let's go. Let's do it. Once you've been through the ringer a couple of times, you start to get a little bit jaded and cynical, and that kind of gets worn off. The edges, the corners get worn off a little bit, whereas you need something. If when you're drowning in paperwork, you need some reason to want to push through it to get to the other side. You know what I mean? And so having other people with the energy around you it helps.
The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by Amazon Prime Video. One of the best on-demand streaming services available, Amazon Prime Video features exclusive Amazon originals as well as popular movies and TV shows. Watch Amazon Prime Video anytime, anywhere. The first time you and I spoke was when Event Zero came out, so that was 7 years ago. All right, so that was 2017.
Yeah.
All right. is Event Zero, when you look at Event Zero now, when other people look at Event Zero now, for people who don't know, it's a really great film. I gave it 4 stars on my website. It's about a biological like attack in Sydney. And what I loved about the movie is like it was showing like what would happen if something like this happened, like a virus went out. And then like 3 years later, a virus goes out and Sydney gets locked down and everything else. Do you and other people look back in Event Zero now and look at it in a different light post-COVID as opposed to pre-COVID?
Dude, absolutely. Like it's actually a little bit terrifying. Like even before COVID, I think because of some of the because the film also deals with some issues, political issues, and
Yes.
racism and things like that. And so we were on set filming. I remember the day we were on set filming the day Donald Trump was elected as
Mm.
president of the United States. And so when we were in post production, some of those early, all that crazy stuff of him sort of coming in was starting to take place. And when I sat down with the writers on that one, we were trying to come up with stuff that we felt was pushing pretty like to the point where like, we go any further than that, it's going to be a bit ridiculous and no one will believe it. Like that's too much. So we'll stop here. And then by the time we finished the film, there were literally scenes out of the film that we had written that we were seeing come back to us on the news from the United States post Trump's election. I was like, what is happening? So it was weird, even like way before we even got to COVID. So, but it is interesting to see. It is interesting to note, I think, how much of it we did see in a sense or predict, like the conspiracy theorists and the all of that sort of stuff. Like it's kind of weird. You work when you try to write something, you work to make something as plausible as possible. And then something like that goes down, you come out the other side and go, I mean, I'm glad we made it plausible, but it's kind of like we're living it now. That's weird. It's very
Mm.
strange. It's very,
It
very
is.
strange.
Yeah, because I remember when the COVID hit. I don't know why, but I was thinking back to, oh God, Event Zero. I was like thinking about that movie because no other Australian film at that time, what I can even think of, that really approached that kind of material like that before.
Yeah.
Especially in the way that you did it in the movie, because it goes through like the political ramifications and social stuff and what will happen and what will happen to the city and what I can. It's a really it's still I think a movie that has a bit of a gut punch to it when watching it, even post going through some of the things that are kind of similar. Of course, it wasn't like a biological attack or anything, but it was like, the whole thing about lockdowns and restrictions and the government rule and the debate about authority versus health and all that kind of stuff was really
Yeah,
difficult.
thanks, man. Well, the interesting part about the fact that, ours is set up as a false flag kind of biological attack, but um, that's what a lot of people thought COVID was.
Hmm.
I was like, what? you know? So it's kind of, yeah, I don't know. Anyway, it was an odd one. It's a very, very odd one. But yeah, thanks for the kind words, man. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. I want to go now to a different game I like to play called Rapid Fire Questions. I'm going to throw some questions to you. You let me know
Okay.
your answer. Be free to expand if you want.
All right.
So I've been doing some research or some things I picked up, and I just want to confirm and
All
do
right.
some other fun stuff as well.
All
So
right. Here
one
we
of
go.
them is I read in an interview that you said that Jaws is you think is the greatest film of all time. Is Jaws still for you the top kind of like film for you?
See again, man. This is a question that changes every day. I think it's absolutely up there. The other one that I probably consider as one of the greatest of all time would be the Godfather. If you put it this way, Jaws, Godfather, and Goodfellas. I think on any given day you'll probably get one of those three.
And any given day, you should go show up on TV. You're not changing the channel. You're watching it.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Um, not allowing you to choose any of your films for this question. Favorite Australian horror movie?
Okay, good. There's no way I would ever choose one of my own films. That would be a horrible, horrible thing to do. Favorite Australian horror movie? Wow. I mean, look, maybe it's because it's so fresh in my brain, but I really, really loved Talk to Me. I thought that was amazing. Um,
Mm.
Going back to what made me feel really, really icky the first time I watched it in the best possible way, Wolf Creek could have to go a long way as well to
Mm.
sort of just going, that's a great, great film. So yeah, probably one of those two, I think.
Um, for you, I know you spoke before about your experience with Alien when you were a young kid, but let's go back to like, yeah, when you were like a teenager or adult. What do you think is the scariest moment in a film you saw when you were much more mature in age and still had quite an effect on you? Is there a moment that kind of sticks out for you?
It's a good question. Um, God, I think there are a few moments in. Yeah, you know what? Quite possibly, if I had to pick one scene out of the film, but there's a few out of them. Possibly the decapitation out of Hereditary was something that
Oh,
I was just kind of
wow,
like,
yeah,
what the
yeah.
hell? But that scene is that film is full of so many scenes that just hit you where you're going, what's happening? I'll go with that one, but there's probably a few out of that film that would be contenders. Yeah.
You know, one of the most scary scenes that still has an effect on me, and it's a weird one because people don't choose this one from The Exorcist. It's the scene where she Reagan is put under like a trance by a psychiatrist, and she has her hands like this, and she kind of looks up at him like that. I think that like even though that movie's filled with like gore, that I think that moment there
Yeah.
is when I remember I watched that first time I watched some of that, I was really young and I couldn't watch anymore because it was on TV or something. I didn't watch it. But I watched it again when I was like 18 or something. And that scene, that's when I went, okay, all right, this
There's
is
a lot of I really dig that subtle stuff though. Hey, like I think one of my favorite moments. I think it was the first Conjuring film, if I remember it correctly. And the girl keeps pointing to there's something behind the door. There's something behind the door.
yeah,
But
yeah,
there's nothing there. It's just darkness, but you
yeah.
become obsessed with trying to see what's there. And it's so effective because you're like, am I just not seeing it? Or is it just not there? Or was it that messing with your head is absolutely brilliant. So yeah, I hear you on yeah, I mean, The Exorcist is full of so many. I guess I didn't choose anything from any of the older films because you were like, you know, later in life, I'm like, well, I watched The Exorcist. I was pretty young. So that was a long time
um,
ago.
so what is your favorite horror movie poster? Do you have a poster or a VHS cover or anything that kind of sticks out to mind for you as one that
Gosh.
really works for you?
Look, I mean, it's hard to go past the iconic stuff, right? And you've got two of them right behind you there, like that original Jaws poster and that image from The Exorcist are two of the most like iconic things of all time. So it's kind of hard to go past those. Um, but otherwise, I'd say I really love the original, not the original, the John Carpenter The Thing poster
Yeah, yeah,
with the light coming out. I think it's just a great image. It's just a
yeah.
really strong image. Of course, you have it on hand. There you
That
go.
one. I have to put this up somewhere. I don't know where. I'm running out of space. If I put up any more, my wife has told me if I buy any more horror t-shirts, putting up any more posters, it's going to be big trouble. So I'm trying my best to be really, just get really conservative with it all.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I hear you on the t-shirt thing. When we did Event Zero, I actually managed to get through the entire shoot with a different t-shirt every day, a different print,
yeah.
horror or movie print t-shirt every day. So yeah, anyway.
All right. Last one, and you'll be surprised how split this is, and it kind of makes me a little disturbed about the human race. But I'm going to ask you anyway. Especially, I think this is the first kind of person with Italian background I got to ask this.
Okay.
Pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
Hell no. No.
Yeah, yeah,
It's just
yeah,
wrong. It's
yeah,
just wrong.
yeah.
Yeah. The less said, the better, I think.
Because I've had some people's like it's split. There's no like maybe sometimes like it's like a yes or a no. My thing is, and I remember I was speaking to someone I forgot who it was, but we were like, you can't put something sweet on something otherwise it's dessert, right? It's like, and I know you said before we'll talk about candy and stuff, but I don't know about it putting something sweet on a pizza like a pineapple or a fruit kind of thing. I don't think it works.
I don't know.
Works as well.
I think fruit is the thing. I think it's the misleading thing. Like, there's nothing wrong with like essentially what's a dessert pizza. Like, you can put Nutella on a pizza; it's fantastic.
But
But
is it pizza? But is it pizza? Is it Nutella pizza, or is it just a dessert called pizza? You know what I mean? Is it actually?
well, that I guess comes down to that gets very subjective. But pineapple is just wrong.
I do wonder where that started. I wonder if it was like maybe a Pacific. It has to be a Pacific thing, right? Or maybe a California thing. I'm not sure.
I think it was, if I remember correctly, it was some Greek fellow who decided it was a good idea, and then it took off from there. So probably tells you all you need to know.
All right. So I want to talk about. So we talked about your career, so like your background and all the different influences and stuff. What's next for you coming up? Because I know you got your hands in like so many pies. You're like producing, you're writing, show running, movies. Well, I want to talk about at least the movie side of things. We're going to get back to seeing you in a director's chair, for example. Is that something that's going to happen very soon for you?
That I mean, it's something that's going to happen. How soon is a good question. So there's a bunch of projects on the slate at the moment that we're kind of pushing forward. Some are for me to direct, some are not. So most recently, we were lucky enough to receive a little bit of development money from Screen Australia to work up a project called Over the Edge, which is kind of like a bit more of a psychological thriller kind of vibe.
Oh, that was based on the short film that you did, right?
Inspired by, yeah, it's a very different vibe. The original shorts very kind of plays like a Hitchcockian kind of mistaken identity thriller type thing. What Barbara and I, who is the lead in the film, and who we've written this project together, what we realized when we tried to take that, because that was originally the idea, it was like, oh, let's take the short, we'll do the feature version of that, that could be fun, is that we were more interested in the character of this kind of strung out composer and what she might be willing to do to get her muse back rather than that specific scenario. So we kind of picked up that composer and dropped her in a bit of a new story and a new story world. So it's a very different film, a very different tone to that sort of Hitchcock kind of vibe. So that's probably one of the things that we're trying to push on at the moment. And there's a couple of things, like I say, including a tunnel sequel that I'm hoping we might see moving in the next sort of few months. But it's just a constant stream of conversations and hustle, and it's it only takes one of the right yeses to unlock everything. So that's what we're looking for at the moment.
That's awesome to hear, because I'm always a big fan of your stuff and a big fan of your films, and especially
Cheers,
I
man.
love it when you get in the director's chair and do stuff as well, because that's where initially knew you from when talking about Event Zero so many years ago. So it's great
Yeah,
to hear
great.
they're going to be doing that again. And for
Oh man,
everyone
I
out there
can't wait.
listening, yeah, well, especially like a tunnel sequel gets like up and running as well. I know a lot of people will be really interested in seeing something like that as well. So
Yeah.
yeah. So everyone out there listening, go to enzotedeschi.com.au. I'm going to have the link in my show notes as well, so check out all the news things. I'm going to have the link as well for deadhouse.tv as well, so you guys can check out all the content there. And yeah, Enzo, man, I thank you so very much for your time today, for taking the time to talk about all things your career and horror movies. It's been a
No, thanks for
real
having
pleasure to
me.
talk to you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to talk to you, man. Always is. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for watching the Matt's Movie Reviews channel. Please subscribe for more reviews, podcast interviews, and exclusive content.